Hi everyone, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate it, thank you. So as you can see, I've chosen a background full of light, hopefully to offset some of the darkness that this man emits. Stephen Miller, also known as Little Goebbels, who is essentially a pretty avowed fascist, even though of course he denies it vociferously, using a technique that Trump has taught all of his minions, which is basically to always accuse your opponents of the very thing that you're doing. He was doing this with Biden, I remember, when he would talk about Biden being corrupt, because he knew that people were going to call him on his corruption. And Stephen Miller is exactly the same thing. And so when we look at his chart, and this is a chart with an actual birth time, what we notice is Virgo with Moon in Sagittarius. The Sagittarius moon starts to tell us the story by being next to Uranus, because the Uranus was stationary at birth. So it's very, very strong in the chart. And this is going to make him rebellious and reactionary, and he will be, for the most part, executing behind the scenes, because the Moon and Uranus are in the 12th house of the chart. And if we look at what he is going through in his transits, and this is what people typically want to know, what's going to happen with this guy? Is he going to take us all down? What does his chart say? And here's where a chart with an exact time gives you an exact ascendant and an exact zenith, as well as an exact midheaven, which in the chart is shown as MC. And these are very sensitive points, which, if transited by major planets, really tell you what is going on. And so most important here would be that right now, meaning in the summer of 25, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sky has been squaring his Neptune, his rising Neptune, which is basically his ideological position on what the government should be. You already know what that is. He is anti-immigrant, America first in all respects, and fond of promoting cruelty and dark energy, in short. And also, of course, in the comparison to, or the connection to Goebbels, who was the minister of propaganda in the Nazi regime. This is what this guy is fundamentally doing as well. He is rumored to write all the speeches, and he's like, in a sense, Trump's voice out in the world. So the square to Neptune from Aries, Saturn and Neptune, that definitely would keep him in an uneasy place, even though, of course, he's essentially in charge at the moment. But you see this a lot in Trump administrations. People are in charge, and yet they're constantly fighting back, uneasy, nervous, and of course, it's not going to help his popularity at all. When you've got Saturn-Neptune squaring Neptune, Neptune is often the way people in large numbers see you, your popularity. The reverse of that would be that Neptune is doing well, celebrity, and lots of people following you. But in squares, that's obviously not good for him. But if we're looking ahead, I think the key thing here is the rising degrees, as I said earlier, the 14-degree Capricorn rising, because Saturn next year goes to that very point in Aries, at the nadir of the chart, at the very bottom, therefore squaring the ascendant. This makes this guy one among a number of these Trump cabinet people that are caught in the Saturn energy of 2026 unfavorably. Whenever Saturn is hitting an important point, in this case the ascendant, the energy becomes more difficult, people turn against you, things aren't going well, and in general you simply aren't happy. Plain and simple. That's the bottom line. And even though it backtracks from there to about 7 degrees, 8 degrees by the end of the year, in the 9-degree range around election time, effectively once a planet is at a degree range, it's there right through. So therefore, I would put this guy in the category of a number of these cabinet people signaling that the 26 elections do not go to their liking, bottom line. And if you keep moving further into 27, then there's a point in 27 where the Venus in this chart will get squared. And this also is not going to be good because the Venus rules the 10th sign, the place of career, Libra. And so that's 27. But now I can turn to something that I've already done with Trump in prior videos, namely taking a person's chart and blending it with the country that they're in. This is true for anyone, but it's going to be even more true for a person in government, because then it will reflect the patterns in their tenure. And here is where you blend the two charts, and the chart that you get shows that Saturn is square the Sun and Mercury. And this right away, it makes it harder to succeed, bottom line, unless you're very good at expressing Saturn. Of course, Saturn in Scorpio, the thing about Scorpio is that, in a sense, it's the sign of truth, even if at the bottom end it's the complete opposite, because you get a lot of criminality and mafioso activity in Scorpio as well. But Scorpio is the most fond of truth. Having it in Scorpio in the 12th, squaring Sun and Mercury in this blended chart isn't really a great alignment, and even more so in terms of the future, when you realize that in 2028, which is the next presidential election, Saturn by then will be in Taurus, and so therefore it'll be opposing itself and squaring the Sun and Mercury. This is pretty much the perfect recipe for failure, for denial, and so I think in that sense we can be hopeful if you are worried about this guy, lasting into the future and being a never-ending problem. Final thing I'll say is that back to his natal chart and the Pluto in Scorpio near the midheaven, this enhances his fascistic impulses. Pluto is famous for drifting into patterns of domination and fascism, so elevated near his midheaven perfectly explains it, and even more so when you notice that Jupiter from Aquarius squares it, which enhances it even more in terms of going in that direction. But also Pluto itself is transiting through Aquarius, thereby squaring itself. So during 2025 and 2026, he is all in on this kind of talk, and if anything, he might have to taper it down, reduce it next year when the Saturn squares him, because he's likely to get involved in controversial negative issues, which Saturn is famous for, where you see the stop sign, you have to reduce, you have to pull back, you have to stay within yourself more than you'd want to. Bottom line on this extremely odious creature, let's all just hang in there and wait for the transits to give him a hard time, and they will.